health workers because they are the reason that we are here today. We really appreciate this. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this solemn ceremony where we are observing the first anniversary since the country's first COVID case was diagnosed, right here in our province, right here in our district. I actually remember the day when we received this news very vividly, Gwabe. The premier of the province was on the podium and he was delivering the state of the province address. When the news came in, I got a little note that was shoved into the sitting and said, the province of KwaZulu-Natal seems to have the first case in the country. I could not believe it. I went out and I made frantic calls. I was not sure if it was true. I was not sure if it was fake news. But the moment I got that note, all the buttons were pressed in the province. I must indicate that a month before that, when we came back in January from the December holidays, as a province, we had been working, or we thought at the time, because when you look in retrospect, you realize we had not been working as hard as we started working in March. But around January and February, we were working very hard, trying to prepare for COVID-19, not because we believe that as the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we're going to be the first ones to receive a case, but we believe that we needed to be ready should it happen and should a case come into our province. Since then, and immediately at that point, we sprang into action and life as we knew it changed forever. Not just for me, not just for the management of the Department of Health, but for all the health workers and the people of this country. We have worked with lightning speed as a province to reconfigure our hospitals. Our contractors have broken records, helping us to create more than 3,000 new beds, new isolation beds, and I think health workers will understand the difference between an ordinary bed and an isolation bed and understand the difference and what does it actually mean to our facilities. At the moment, only 7% of the beds are occupied, and we really appreciate that because it means those that are infected with the virus and are quite sick are not as many as they were before. But we also recruited more than 10,000 staff on contractual basis in order to in order to fight this particular battle. And in that regard, I really wish to appreciate the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal together with his Executive Council, because had we not been given the authority and the money to actually employ these contract workers, we would not have been able to do so. And I really appreciate that, Premier, and I had hoped that the ladies and gentlemen who are in here were really going to clap hands because it was a serious feat from our side to be able to employ 10,000 people within such a short space of time. We appreciate the support, Kuzeni. We appreciate the support you continue to give us. We appreciate the support, and I say you continue to give us because as of Wednesday, the Executive Council led by the Premier approved again that we extend these contracts with another 6 months. So we will have them again until the end of September, I believe, and I'm very excited. I see the matron breathes a sigh of relief, Premier, as we say this, because she understands what it means not to have these resources anymore within our spectrum. So we appreciate that part of the work. So the reason why we gathered here today, we believe that we can never say thank you enough to our health workers. No amount of talking can say thank you. We know that for a fact. We have had a number of health workers that have been infected, and the number is beyond 5,000, that of health workers that have been infected. But we have had a number or a substantial number of our own health workers that have passed on. And the fact that these health workers were in the forefront and worked hard, some of them knew the dangers that they were being faced with, but decided to continue with the work that they were doing nonetheless, is something that should always, always be celebrated. And we thought that today, let's come to where we had our first meeting with the minister and the health workers in Grace, and say to the health workers in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, thank you very much for the work that you have done. We see the pressure that you are under. We appreciate the pressure that you are under, and we are doing the best that we can as the province of KwaZulu-Natal, or the government in KwaZulu-Natal in particular, because this is where the Premier and the DG are able to lead us. And with every resource that is available in this province, the first penny that, or the first extra penny that is received by the province, the Premier and the DG make sure that the Department of Health is covered. We know that because of the challenges we previously had in terms of staffing, the 10,000 resources that we might have currently might not be enough, but we are working towards getting more, and we hope we will be able to do so. But that is just by way of saying we understand the pressure that you are under, and we are working very hard to ensure that that pressure does not continue. So today's session is not meant for me to speak, but today's session is really to come and commemorate, but commemorate in a sense of appreciating the health workers that we have had. That is why we are greatly honored by having the Premier with us today. We are greatly honored by having the Minister with us today. It is not something you take for granted where you have the Premier and the Minister in one program, particularly a program of the province like this one. It could have just have been myself, and we would have done the work and continued. But the fact that both of them are here, it's a clear indication of how government values the health workers and how government values our food soldiers, and which is what we call the health workers in general. With those few words, and I thought maybe I must stop there because I will just be tempted to give a keynote address when I'm not supposed to do so. But that is the purpose of our meeting, so that we appreciate the work, but indicate that today, a year ago, is a day when the majority of us whose lives have changed. We have literally been working for 12 months, but we had been working 2 months before then. So it means we have been working for more than 15 months really on COVID-19, and not just ourselves as management, but health workers as well. Majority of us have not taken leave. Some of you who took leave in December were recalled by the head of department. In December, we were recalled by the head of department because we then realized that we were getting the second wave, therefore everyone needed to come back and we needed all hands on deck. We really appreciate those who headed the call of the head of department and came back and were able to work. Thank you very much, head of department, with the work that you are doing. I am handing over to you, but siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi nibe nathi namhlanje, and siyabonga ukuthi sikwazi ukuthi kulolu suku sibe ndawonye sihlangane nabasebenzi bezempilo kakhulukazi, ngoba yibona esicabanga ukuthi kubalekile ukuthi ngaso sonke isikhathi masithola ithuba siba acknowledge, ngaso sonke isikhathi masithola ithuba sikwazi ukubatshela ukuthi we value them and umsebenzi abawenzayo siyawubona. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Ama districts wonke asixhumene nathi alalele nawo. We are going to get testimonies from some of the healthcare workers who we are commemorating today. Esizwe ukuthi ibaphathe kanjani lento from the 5th of March last year until today. May I start with the professional nurse wasemkhanyakude asinike her testimony.
Qiniso nje sisebenze kanzima kakhulu, but siyabonga ukuthi abantu abaningi bakwazi ukuphila and bedependele kithi, baba nethemba ukuthi hayi nginonesi phambi kwami. Siyabonga kakhulu. Bebekwazi batshela ukuthi aninodwa, sikhona phambi kwenu. Ilesson engiyifunde kakhulu ngo-COVID ukuthi ikhona uma ukuthi uyagula if ukwazi ukuthi into lakusebenza isebenza kanjani, nokuthi ukholele ukuthi imigomo ikanjani, wenza lokhu nalokhu nalokhu, umuphethe i-COVID ulalela ukuba kushoyo, kuyasebenzeka. But if ukuthi awulaleli, bezama ukuthi sikutshele ukuthi yenza kanje, kazi ukuthi enze lokhu esikushoyo. Abantu abaningi baphilile ngenxa yezandla zethu. Siyabonga nathi siyakwazi ukuthi sinese umuntu ephila. Mina nje bengiqala ukuthi ngisebenze under i-pressure enje, but ngibonga kakhulu ukuthi bakwazile ukuthi bathi nesinyawo, ayi siyabonga ngiphilile ngifike nginje, but ngokuthinta izandla zakho sengingcono. Engingakusho nje sibonga kakhulu i-support esiyithole kumazinga wonke, kusukela kwi-national nakwi-province kuye kwi-local. Engikuthanda kakhulu ukuthi u-government wethu usekhiphe i-vaccine. Siyathemba ukuthi i-level yabantu abazogula nazoshona izoba ncane because i-vaccine u-government useyikhiphile. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Asibonge umlayezo. Can we ask Dr. Bradley Naidu to come to the podium and give his testimony?
I remember the night that the first patient came in quite well. It was actually my last night shift before I was scheduled to go on leave. A relatively good night in the hospital. And then around midnight, I received a call saying that there is a coronavirus case, that the ambulance drivers would be bringing the case through to our hospital. Please open up our isolation unit and please admit the patient and go from there. Our senior doctors came out, our nursing staff came out, and I think it must have been almost an hour or so before the patient came in. But that 1 hour felt like one day of life. A million thoughts rushed through my mind at that point regarding the patient. With all of this news from overseas speaking about how sick people were, we were wondering how sick this individual would be. Would they need oxygen? Would they need ICU? What care could we give them? Because they were so little known at that point. But thoughts also went through to badly my own personal safety as well as the safety of the team around us. And much in those preceding weeks was done with the exceptional work from our minister, our MEC, our leaders, our local hospital team, to set up an isolation area, to make sure that the area was safe and conducive to our patient and ourselves. And amazing work was done by our IPC sisters and team in terms of securing us PPE, training us how to use the PPE, which is now called donning and doffing. And all of this came into play in that one fateful night. So many thoughts went through our mind as to then, would the PPE work? Would we be exposed? What would happen if our PPE failed when we saw the patient? And again, just again to the safety of our team. But despite all of that, we put our patient first and we made sure that we took care of them before anything else. Those first few days were incredibly dynamic in the sense that things that we all took for granted, being able to just see a patient normally, write notes normally, go in and prescribe medications, take blood tests and do testing, all became a very unique challenge, and many people with incredible ideas had to step up to fix these and to find solutions for these problems. Simple things like every bit of stationery or paper that went in to see the patient had to remain there for infection control purposes. I think, again, looking back on those first few days, I think the bravery, the selflessness, and the willingness of not just our doctors, but our nursing staff, our radiotherapists, physiotherapists, porters, cleaners, as well as the ambulance staff, must never be overlooked or overseen. And I think going forward with our new vaccine rollout plans, unlike before where we're entering a new era of COVID treatment, unlike previously where we were full of anxiety and despair, I think now we all stand united with a common goal of defeating the coronavirus, and we all stand optimistically and looking forward to a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, Dr. Shabalala. Today marks the very significant milestone in the history of our province and the country as we take stock of what have transpired in the year from 2020 till now. We're not here to mark the day because of its nature, while the day imposed number of difficulties and challenges. altering the life as we used to know it. But we're here to thank and celebrate the contribution made by health workers who dedicated themselves ekulweni nalempi esibhekene nayo. So I'm here to say thank you, thank you, thank you. If we can, as led by Mayor Umaphumulo, but it will be also correct to do it formally, shayele abasebenzi bezimpilo izandla, sibabonge. We say least we forget, and we say so because we, as living generations, were made to be pathfinders in the fight against COVID-19. As the province, we're known of registering positive first. If it's something that is happening for a first time, it will be known in KwaZulu-Natal. But it used to be something, it used to be things that are positive. Unfortunately, and not because we would have wished that this happened somewhere, but we're the first to experience the first case of COVID-19. Naturally, such developments come with shock, fear, and a deep sense of panic and anxiety. We would want to take this opportunity to thank all of our senior managers in particular who came to the fore, working with us to develop a strategy that helped us to navigate till now. We want to thank His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, the Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, for their unwavering support, leadership, and guidance. We will also want to thank the MEC for Health, who didn't surrender and run away, but stood firm with us and tried to provide leadership, updating the Executive Council, working with the dedicated teams, including the war room they established, in ensuring that we develop a comprehensive approach. By nature, as you grow up, you become very conservative, and if you are an old person, and when I say old, I include myself, I count from 45 upward. So you tend to become more conservative and don't adapt easy. We had to change things, the way we live, and we have to adapt quickly. And that adaptation had to be introduced, and we had to be educated, but had to be forced on us. Not only because those who were forcing it were meant or they by nature are aggressive, but adaptation was required. We're required to embrace new protocols. Screening, testing became the order of the day. We're required to follow prevention and control protocols. We had to engage in identifying and mobilizing resources, ensuring that we alter space at hospitals and erecting field hospitals, recruitment and training of nurses and staff, and ensure the provision of PPEs. In this regard, where the treatment was not good, we apologize. We know that there are citizens in this country who had to be compelled to wear masks, to stay at home, and in that our country had to use even the South African National Defence Force. We are sad that we've lost some of our compatriots. Not even a single sector will say it has not lost and became a victim of COVID-19. Seated at the legislature, the number of members who succumbed to COVID-19. Here we know that there are also healthcare workers. We also know that in all professions, even in the public service, who have suffered. And therefore we say, all of us must embrace the new normal, continue to protect ourselves. We take comfort and little hope on the new developments, especially on the fact that the cases infection rate is subsiding. But that does not mean we are out of the wound. We are still within the challenge, and as government, we will still want to caution and emphasize that we can still be faced, or we can still face what is called the third wave. And therefore, let us all be responsible, try to ensure that we prevent infection. Government, as government, will continue doing all in our power to fast-track the arrival of more doses of vaccine so that the public can take the advantage of this. Having said that, let me equally thank all stakeholders who participated in the fight against COVID-19. We want to thank the healthcare workers, we thank the civil society, we thank the traditional leaders and traditional healthcare practitioners, we thank the faith-based organization, we thank the private sector, we thank the taxi industry, we thank Operation Sugumasake. A number of these structures I've mentioned stood up in unison and acted for a common cause of protecting the nation. Our key message even today is that we're not out of this pandemic. We must all ensure that we embrace the preventative measures that have been put in place. We must, all of us, ensure that we fight the spread of the fake news, disinformation, and all sorts of conspiracy theories. At this juncture, we want also to express our appreciation. As government of KwaZulu-Natal, we wish to thank each and every media organization and media practitioner for their deep sense of patriotism. They have played a crucial role in ensuring that the society is suitable and adequately informed about matters pertaining to COVID-19. We know in such a democratic social society, the role of the media is to educate. And siyafisa ukubabonga bonke abezindaba nabo ngakuhle sibashayele izandla. That educational role have helped us to fight this pandemic. Yesterday, we learned of the passing of a prominent radio, television, and print journalist, the anchor at ENCA, Ms. Karima Brown. We take this opportunity to convey our deepest condolences to her family, friends, and colleagues. The world of journalism is poorer without Karima Brown, who was one of those professionals that were known of telling the stories as they are and be objective enough. Would want also to take this opportunity as our parting message. We thank the courage displayed by healthcare workers from this institution, but also we want to thank professionalism within the healthcare or the health system as a whole in our province. To all healthcare workers who felt during the war, we will always remember them as true patriots and heroes who stood firm, soldiered on, and died with their boots on in the service of their country, men and women. Would want to emphasize that the rollout of the vaccine is one mitigating factor that needs to be embraced by all of us. We'll continue with vaccination rollout. The sites that are currently used for vaccination is Inkosi Albert Luthuli Central Hospital, Prince Mshiyeni Memorial Hospital, Edendale Hospital, Matadeni Hospital, and General Kizenga Mpanza Hospital. Let us continue wearing our mask at all times, especially when we are in company of senior citizens or when we are with those who have comorbidities, and when we venture into public platforms. Let us wash our hands, let us sanitize, let us continue to practice social distancing, and this will be with us up until we conquer this pandemic. Asingabazi sizoyinqoba lempi, angeke yasehlula nanini, kodwa okubalekile ukuthi sibe ndawonye. Angigcineke ngokubonga engeke ngabakhohlwa ngoba ngase ngibakhohlwe ngingakhokhela kanzima ukubakhohlwa. Angibonge the labor unions for being with us. They played a dual role. Ordinarily, they will normally play a role of advancing the interest of workers and workers alone. And in this case, they were more patriotic. They placed the health of the workers as a priority, but they were also concerned about the livelihood of the citizens and the country as a whole. Ngiyafisa ukubonga Dinosa, Nehawu, and all unions that are in the province. They've been very supportive. We might have differed there and there with one or two statements. That is part of life, and we must accept that. But we wish to give you a big round hand of applause. We thank unions for the work they've done.
Thank you very much. May I ask that whilst we stand, we just bow our heads and observe a moment of silence in memory of all the more than 50,000 South Africans who have lost their life in the fight against COVID-19, the health workers, the friends, the relatives, and all those who have lost their lives, including, of course, Ms. Karima Brown, who's been one of the top leaders in the media industry, and many of those in that industry that have lost their lives, including those who are health workers amongst us. May their souls rest in peace. Amen. Thank you. The Premier of the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Honorable Sihle Zikalala, the MEC for Health in the province, Honorable Nomagugu Simelane, the Director General in the Office of the Premier, Dr. Mkhize, the Head of Department in the of Health, KwaZulu-Natal, Dr. Shabalala, the Mayor of Mkungundlovu, Lunkulu Maphumulo, councillors, health workers, doctors, nurses, and all the allied professions, and members of the media and fellow South Africans. On this day, 1 year ago, we all received the shocking news that the first patient who was diagnosed with coronavirus had actually been identified. We are here to look back at the year and thank all South Africans for the fearless manner in which they've approached the fight against COVID-19. We thank the President for his leadership, together with the Cabinet, the Department of Health, as well in all provinces, nationally and in all provinces, as well as the ministerial advisory committees, the different ministers and departments for the role that they've played in the fight against COVID-19. We thank the members of the health worker community for all the work that they've done looking after those who have suffered COVID-19. We thank all of the South Africans who have participated in the care of those who have been affected by COVID-19. I look back on this day as one of the days that really was filled with a lot of anxiety and trepidation as I drove from Johannesburg in the morning from a meeting which I was addressing to Cape Town to the address which we're going to have in the afternoon in a debate around the preparedness of the country on coronavirus infection. I had to call the President and say to His Excellency, Mr. President, this is the call I have wished never to ever have to make, to confirm that we have the first COVID-19 positive patient identified in South Africa. I went to brief the President, and thereafter the media, and the rest of the debate was on the basis of how well prepared we are as South Africa for this. It has been a very rough journey, if one may say. In that process, we've learned a lot, we've made many mistakes, and we've also achieved a lot. And on that basis, it is important for us to thank all the South Africans for all of what we've gone through. It was just about a week before, on the 29th of January, that I had a call to Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who is the WHO Director General, and inquired how things were going, because there was this whole story of the infection in Wuhan, and there was a lockdown around Wuhan, and they had also discovered this infection in the Diamond Jubilee ship parked off the coast of Japan. And this, he indicated to me that they had actually found more people outside China who had been infected, although linked to that what happened in Japan, in China. And that had made them decide to declare COVID-19 public health emergency of international concern. On that basis, we started getting ready to set the same kind of emergency structure in South Africa, and we'd set up a call center just to be able to give support and information to everyone around. And of course, once this patient was discovered, we then found out there were about 9 of them in the country, and the whole machinery had to be activated to find where all these particular individuals were. I had come to KwaZulu-Natal the following day and called the MECs and MEC of Health and Education because there was a panic at Cowan School when the parents didn't know how to deal with this matter. I recall that we had a meeting with these parents and had this long discussion, after which the situation kind of eased off. But what really uplifted my spirit was a visit to Gray's Hospital, and we're in this hall when we had the discussion about the preparedness, and there was a nurse who came over and started demonstration on how you don or how you put on the PPE and how you deal with the issues of infection prevention and control. What was most heartening for me was the team of nurses who sat here, and when we were done, they actually started singing that we don't fear corona. We will be ready to nurse all our people. That was the beginning of the hope that we have all shared as we moved around. I spoke to Premier, I was reminding Premier Zigalala that at some discussion we had, I said to Premier, one day, Premier, you'll be the ones who will be leading, talking to the whole nation about COVID-19. And he was a little bit unsure about this because he thought this was a matter for the doctors. And COVID-19 has ceased to be a matter for nurses, doctors, and health nurses. The main distinction is that if you want to control the infection as it affects one person, then of course the health workers are the ones who are able to do that. Case management, treating of the symptoms, dealing with the disease is their forte. And they've done a magnificent job, and I really want to applaud all the health workers for that. I do believe we should give them another round of applause. In the process, when we were nursing this particular patient, I actually had to talk to the patient to find out how the patient was. Looking back, that patient should not even have ever been admitted. He was so well. He just had a slight dryness of the throat, and that is it. Many more people have had symptoms that have not necessitated them being admitted with mild or moderate symptoms. So I had a discussion with Dr. Dawood. I don't know if she's here. Oh, yes, yes. We had a chat, and I wanted to know, there's not much I can teach a physician on how to treat a patient. I wasn't so much worried about that, but I asked her, how are you dealing with the patient? She explained to me. However, my main issue was not that. It was just to gauge the sense of confidence and anxiety in the doctor, because he was leading the team. I found her to be very confident. I actually have spoken to many doctors, physicians, nurses, and I've been amazed at the courage that they've had to face this COVID-19. And for that, I must say that that's really where my inspiration has come from, because you have here people who are daily having to face these particular patients, nurse them, comfort them, support them, and make sure that they get better. And in that process, they must actually get off those PPEs and walk home and be sure that they will still have their families protected. This has been the story of South African health workers throughout the country. And in the evenings, I get messages of people who are affected, and I have to call doctors, find out how this patient, how are they doing. Sometimes I have to talk to the relatives and comfort them and refer them and also link them up with the doctors in this regard. I think the real crunch time for us came when we had to sit and say, every second day, the numbers of people who are positive are doubling. What do we do, and where are we going to land? I recall we had several meetings with a number of experts and a lot of professors discussing this issue. It became very clear that the numbers, the way they were rising, they were likely to overrun the health services unless we create space during which we should be able to go and look at how to upgrade health services so that we can absorb the numbers of people. And then came the whole expression of flattening the curve. Let's draw out this infection. It should not rise very rapidly. Draw it out over a long time and make sure that even at the peak, it does not go beyond what Department of Health's capacity is to handle those patients who will be coming through. And I sat in the meeting and we explained this issue to the President and the Cabinet, and then they asked me, what do we think about this? So I looked around and I said, my President and the colleagues, this infection is going to affect many people, and many of us will be infected. By the time we get over the other side, many of us would have been infected. They looked at me, and many months later, the President told me that he didn't like that statement because he thought it was kind of mean to say that. But later on, he realized that, in fact, this was a situation which was affecting everyone, and no one would actually be spared of this infection. We then had to sit together and look through what would help to avoid this. It was clear again that taking from the experience from other countries, we needed to actually stop the virus from moving by stopping people from moving. And that's when the decision of the lockdown came about. A most uncomfortable and painful decision, but it had to be taken to help to protect our people. Imagine now to say to South Africans, there is no travel between provinces. Most of the people live in several provinces with relatives this side and work on the other side. But for a while, they were asked not to do that, not to visit. Most difficult and inconvenient decision. It had to be done because we had to save our people and prepare our health services. We thank South Africans for cooperating. I took a drive from Johannesburg to Pietermaritzburg. There were no flights. And as I went past Harry Smith, a filling station and a shopping complex outside Harry Smith that normally is a bustle, was where a lot of people change over and refresh. There was not a soul. Just one or two people stood around the garage, and then they looked at us. It was like they were very surprised that was a human being traveling. The entire road, the freeway, N3, was like a ghost city. The whole area, no movement of vehicles, except once in a while you see a truck and police van. Then we realized that this thing was very serious. But South Africans supported this decision, and we want to say thank you to all South Africans. And I do wish that we give South Africans a round of applause. That meant no taxis would operate, but the taxi operators cooperated. No buses, everyone cooperated. When industries and businesses could not operate, it was very clear that this is having an untold toll on the South Africans in terms of loss of jobs and income insecurity, food insecurity. All of these were part of the response that South Africans cooperated to make sure that we could fight this COVID-19. We actually had discussions where all departments, all ministers had to agree that there would have to be movement of funds towards the Department of Health to go and buy protective gear, to buy medicines, to buy ventilators, to buy, to install oxygen, and everywhere. Our modelers gave us numbers and made us realize that there was a shortfall of beds that was attended to. They gave us a shortfall on the staffing. We had to attend to that. So all of that was because we had a president and a cabinet and departments that were prepared to actually shift resources to this in this regard. So this lockdown went in for about 3 weeks, and after that we realized we're not quite ready, and it was important to extend it. And then, of course, we started calling for reinforcement from other parts of the world. WHO, Cuba, and some other parts. We received a lot of support from many countries, particularly on experts' advice, China, Italy, and Spain, and others, where there was direct interaction. But then the Cuban health brigade came over. We had almost 200 of them who came in to say they will come to reinforce our situation. I want to clear just two things about them. Firstly, that they didn't take any jobs from South Africans. We actually employed as many South Africans doctors as we could, and we opened up to say if there were still more that needed to be employed, they needed to be taken up. So there was no displacement of any South African doctor as such. We want to extend our appreciation and gratitude to the Cuban government and all its doctors for the work that they've done to assist us, but we also want to say they came to join South African doctors as colleagues and help to support them. All in all, we screened almost 28 million people, but when we had 100 days into COVID, we had done a screening of 17 million people. But what we had done, we had actually pulled people from various other programs, both government and non-governmental organizations. They went into the community, working with the community health workers to go out and look for the symptoms so that we could identify where the hotspots are, where low transmission was. That actually was the first, and it actually gave lessons for many in the world. And people cooperated with that process. And I want to say again that their cooperation was very much appreciated. Out of that, we were able to then come with what we call the risk-adjusted approach towards our intervention, meaning that we could focus on some of the areas with a view that there's high transmission and low transmission. And that differentiated approach has been the mark of how we've responded to COVID-19. Of course, a lot of work was done to provide relief for those who had lost their jobs, extending the temporary employment relief grants, and also increasing the grant for those who are getting the usual grant. It was quite a difficult situation because many people didn't understand why, and then we had to go to court on many occasions to explain why this was good to assist and help to contain the infection. And of course, you understand South Africans believe that a lot of this was infringing on their rights, and we do agree that to an extent that was the case, and we believe that it could only be done because we're facing a threat which is much bigger than whatever we've seen before. So it was not so much that this was a government that was just intent on taking draconian steps, but it was a government that was trying to do its best to inflict the minimal kind of restrictions, but then to hope to get the maximal impact on the spread of the infection. We went through the first wave, and at the peak of that wave, we'd really been quite all under pressure and very nervous and anxious. One of the most painful and saddest thing about this is how it created a sense of desolation. How for every one of us who had lived with the anxiety and the fear of contracting the infection, I don't believe there's anyone who has never really feared that maybe I'm going to get the infection. Even though 1.5 million people have tested positive, we know more people did get infection, but many of them were having a mild infection. But all of us have lived under that fear that, hey, I might be the next one, I might be the next one. But even those who had it were also having the fear that it might get worse than what they were feeling. And indeed, in some instances, that happened. But then came the problem that you now had to start doing things that were not used to. We're very loving people. We hug, we shake hands, we kiss, we do everything that shows a sense of closeness. But we had abandoned all of that. Completely unusual and not part of our culture of Ubuntu. And of course, all of us had to learn that. You had to now say you can't visit your loved ones because there might be a risk. That's again un-South African. We had to say to everyone, we have to wear a mask. And even if you sit next to somebody, just make sure that they also are wearing a mask. That again was a new thing. Where we had to say that people must stand apart, 1.5 to 2 meters apart, it was important to say, as people do so, they must actually understand it's not because you don't want to be close to the people that you live with, but it's because this is the risk we have. And this, our people actually responded to. All of this for us, as a government, we do appreciate, and this part now of a whole long journey that we've been through. Ultimately, our hospitals started receiving all the patients, and a lot of problem arose with the issues of the PPEs. Firstly, the concern that was inadequacy of the PPEs were to deal with all of this. And I want to thank the unions and professional associations for all the work they did to work with us. It was, of course, at the beginning quite tension between the government and the unions, but at the end of the day, we were all agreed that the protection of the health workers was paramount and they needed to be protected, and we did that. At this point, that we no longer have that problem. We also have had to deal with the issues of concerns and allegations and acts of corruption that were associated with these PPEs, and we want to say that we will continue our commitment to fight against those kinds of irregularities and corruption. So from the point of view of the work we did to protect the health workers, we're at a comfortable space where most of the hospitals, most of the districts do have what we call occupational health and safety committees, and these committees help to make sure that, as we said, no PPE, no work, and so everyone now knows everyone needs to be protected. We then hit the second wave. On this one, I must admit, we actually were taken by surprise. Not our modeling showed us it was going to come sooner. Our modeling didn't show us it was going to happen as severely. Or least of all, did it show that there was going to be a variant of the kind of virulence that we have actually identified. This variant has actually changed even the whole approach now to dealing with COVID-19. We were always clear that what we need is a vaccine, and of course, many countries had gone on to deal with the issues of vaccination. And as they were doing so, we nest a hope that we will also be able to receive those vaccines. After all of this work that had been done, I think it's important for us to say that it's the high level of expertise of our scientists that has helped us to identify the variant. We were transparent and we went out into the public about it. And of course, this has now made some of the countries fear to get South Africans to travel there. But fast forward, we have actually now come to a point where the world has seen the fastest development of vaccines that has ever been seen before, and we have a number of the vaccines that are in place. So we had ordered the AstraZeneca vaccine to start the vaccination in the middle of February, but in the course it was clear that there was a bit of a challenge with this vaccine insofar as South Africa was concerned. We had therefore had to change. Again, the fast thinking and quick action from our health workers and our research council actually got us to be able to receive the vaccines that were available for the trials. And the only way South Africa could access these vaccines was to register an implementation trial, which in this case doesn't actually deal with issues of safety and efficacy. It's just to see what happens after people have been vaccinated, something that all the countries are doing this vaccination, but in our case we're also just doing a study to observe what happens thereafter. It seems a good idea to do so on this one and probably even on the Pfizer one. And so we are now starting on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We have said that 11 million doses are now procured. We have ordered more, but we'll confirm once those agreements are signed. Pfizer as well, we expect some doses this month so that the first million of the people, of the health workers, should actually have their first jabs in March. And then, of course, most of the dosages will come later on. We have just done 92,000 vaccinations, so in another day or so we'll have actually crossed the first 100,000 mark amongst those health workers. We do want to ask our people to be patient about the vaccination, because the vaccination will come for all South Africans that need it. And of course, we will open up the next phase in April, and that phase will open up for teachers, for taxi drivers, for traditional healers, traditional leaders, religious leaders, and everyone. So, and those with comorbidities, we will be looking at it from that point of view. And so we do want to say to South Africans, that phase will be coming, and we will actually open a lot more vaccination sites than we are seeing here today. It's very much likely that we will use most of the Pfizer vaccine in the urban centers where the supply of electricity and storage is much better, and then we'll also use the Johnson & Johnson on some of the smaller towns and big centers. Of course, it will not be rigid like that, but just to make sure that the storage is not a problem. Kubalulekile ukuthi njengoba sibuka lo nyaka ophelayo sikhumbuzana ukuthi bekungelula sithe masithola ukuthi kunomuntu oqala nalesi sifo, kwadinga ukuthi sikwazi ukuxoxisana, sibuke isimo sokuthi izakhiwo zezempilo zizokwazi ukwelapha, zibonelele bonke abangaphilile abaphethwe leli gciwane. Kwadinga ke kube khona ukuvalwa kume yonke into nse ukuze kungabi khona abantu abaningi abazotheleleka ngaleso sikhathi, ukuze sikwazi ukuvula izibhedlela, kwakhiwe nemibhede emisha, kutholakala nabahlengazi nodokotela abaningi ukuze bakwazi ukubhekana nalesi sifo. Ngaleso sizathu sifisa ukubonga bonke abantu baseNingizimu Afrika ukuthi babambisana nohulumeni nobuholi bukamongameli necabinet yonke ukuthi masithatha lezi zinqumo, sithatha izinqumo ezizothi noma zinzima ngokunciphisa amalungelo, kodwa sibe sazi ukuthi sizama ukulekelelana ukulwa nalesi sifo. Into ongeke uyicabange esithulela isiqhoko sokuthi abafundisi bonke, ababhishop nabaphathi bamabandla ahlukene ezenkolo bavumelane nohulumeni ukuthi akume izinkonzo zika Good Friday nama Easter, ngoba lokho kwenza ukuthi kuphephe izimpilo eziningi uma bethi masiphendule amasonto siphendule imizi yethu excuse me, siphendule imizi yethu ukuthi be izindawo zenkolo noma ama-synagogue noma ama-mosque ukuze sikhuleke sisemakhaya sibe sey'nkonzweni sisemakhaya. Kwenzeke lokho kwanceda abantu abaningi, ngabe asikho lapho la sikhona, ngabe kwadlula imiphefumulo eminingi kakhulu. Siyakubonga kakhulu-ke lokho. Nabaningi-ke okwathi uma kuthiwa kume kunganyakazi, abashayeli bamatekisi, abanikazi bamatekisi, abezitolo, nayo yonke imisebenzi nosomabhizinisi abakuhlonipha lokho, siyafisa ukubonga kakhulu sithi kwanceda ukuthi inani labantu abaphatheka ngalesifo singandi kakhulu noma sisibona senyuka ngabe kungaphezulu kwalokho basikwenzanga lokho. Siyafisa futhi nokudlulisa ukuthi siyabaza ubuhlungu abantu abadlule kubo, uma ngabe ukuthi wonke umuntu uhlezi novalo lokuthi kungenzeka kube nguye ozophathwa yile mkhuhlane we-COVID-19. Lokho nje kukodwa kwenza ukuthi isizwe sonke sigule ngenxa yokukhathazeka. Kodwa phezu kwalokho into ebibuhlungu kakhulu ukuthi uma kukhona ogulayo singakwazi ukuyombona esibhedlela, kwesinye isikhathi azadlule emhlabeni. Silobo buhlungu siyabuzwa, siyafisa ukuthi umphakathi wazi ukuthi kubuhlungu kuthina sonke ukuthi besidlula kuleso simo, kodwa siyafisa ukuthi nazi ukuthi ngaleyo ndlela besizama ukuphephisa isizwe. Uma kuthiwa kunomuntu oshonile oyisihlobo, singakwazi ukuya kumfihla ngendlela ejwayelekile, siduduzane ngendlela ejwayelekile ukuthi sikwazi ukumbamba umuntu, siyomkhalisa, siyomduduza, siyomphelezela. Abantu abaningi abavamise ukuthi bakwazi ukuya emngcwabeni, uthola ukuthi manje kuvinjiwe, akwenzeki. Konke lokho kubuhlungu, siyazi ukuthi isizwe sonke sikhathazekile ngakho sithi kubo noma kube buhlungu kanjalo kodwa siyabonga ngoba bekukuphephisa isizwe. Ukuvalwa kwemidlalo ukuthi kushona ilanga noma kuphela impelasonto, abantu bangakwazi ukubuka amaqembu abo emidlalo abawakhonzile, lokho akuyona impilo esiyaziyo, kodwa kwadinga ukuthi sikuvume ukuthi kuzokwenzeka. Ukuthi abantu bangayi enkonzweni ngamasonto noma emasabatha ngemigqibelo, konke lokho siyazi ukuthi kubuhlungu, kodwa sithi bekwenziwa ukuze sikwazi ukudlula kule simo esikusona. Siyazi ukuthi abasebenzi bezempilo bake bakhala kakhulu ukuthi abavikelekile, kwadinga sisebenzisane nenyunyana. Siyazibonga nazo, siyababonga nabo. Siyazi futhi ukuthi kwagcina kulungile ukuthi ukuvikeleka kwabo kwenzeke ngendlela, kodwa siyazi bekunovalo lokuthi umuntu uzophuma emsebenzini afika athelela abaningi ekhaya abazihlobo zakhe. Nakho lokho bekubuhlungu kakhulu. Sithi-ke kubo bonke lobuhlungu esidlule kubo nokulahlekelwa zihlobo nabangani nakho konke okwenzekile, sithi njengeNingizimu Afrika masikudlulise ngoba silwile sakwazi ukubhekana nalesifo. Sekuseleke kancane-ke manje ukuthi uma siya phambili sibhekane nezinto ezibalulekile engizothi zimbili nje. Okokuqala ukuthi iyeza uhlelo lomgomo liyeza lizobe lugxile kakhulu kubasebenzi bezempilo kule nyanga kulezayo, sobe sesivulela kakhulu abantu abasebenza emphakathini, othisha abasebenza ematekisini, izinyanga, izangoma, abasenkonzweni, abasebenza emahhovisi omasipala nabo bonke, nalabo abanezifo ezinye esobe sibhekene nabo kule nyanga ezayo kusukela kuyona kuya phambili. Esithi-ke so dlulisa ukuthi bayithole imigomo bonke, sikudlulise nalokwesabo okukhona ukuthi imigomo iphephile. Sithi lokho kubalulekile. Okwesibili ukuthi ukusebenzisa izifonyo, ama-mask, nokugeza izandla isikhathi esiningi, nokuqinisekisa ukuthi siba nebanga phakathi kwabantu uma bemile, singabi nesinyokotho nesiminyaminya. Konke lokho sikubona kubalulekile ukuthi siqhubeke nako koze kuthiwe sesibona ukuthi inkinga yegciwane seyinciphe kakhulu. Kukho konke lokho kunezinto eziningi esingakazi ukwazi ukuzenza. Abanye abakhala kuma-night club, imihlangano emikhulu ekhona yezepolitiki, yamabandla, imicimbi esiyenzayo, yamasiko, imicimbi yemishado eminye emikhulu, izinto eziningi nemigidi ebiyenziwa ngokwamasiko engakavumi ukwenzeka. Sithi konke lokho masihambisane nemithetho ebekiwe kwesikhashana senzele ukuthi sidlule kulesi simo. To all of us as South Africans, I believe we could have actually been worse off had we not cooperated and formed a united front against COVID-19. But where we are, we must look back. Whilst we mourn those we lost, we must celebrate the achievement up to this point and look forward to an era where South Africa will live a COVID-free life. Thank you very much, Premier. Thanks to the MEC and all the provinces for their support and your cooperation, and all the health workers and all South Africans in general. We want to say thank you. This has been a rough and stormy year, but we made it. We still have to fight on. The battle is not over, but there's hope. Thank you very much.